I started product management about 10 years ago. And like most other people who do product management, I kind of fell into it. So I was studying at Cornell, operations research and industrial engineering. And when you come out of that major, there's like two paths that you can take. You can either turn into like a quant on Wall Street, but I absolutely hated math. And I don't know why I chose that major because it was all math, but I could do that. We learned some chain manufacturing, so like a lot of continuous improvement stuff from a math perspective. So I could have ended up on a factory floor in Pepsi, which a lot of people ended up doing. Or I could have went into software development since we studied quite a bit of that throughout our major. So I took like a lot of computer science and ended up to that point. But to me, none of that really interested me. I liked kind of the business side of a lot of these things as well. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And that's why I ended up in the major, because they called it like the business major of engineering. And I was studying chemical engineering, really did not like that one either, but that's how I got there. So from there too, at the same time, a lot of my passion laid in design. So I had been doing Photoshop since I was in high school. I was entering like these super nerdy competitions called the Technology Students Association, where I was competing in like design around the country. So I was doing that as well. And what happened was one day I was basically applying for jobs, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I had been doing some work with Kodak while I was in school. So we had been part of their innovation center and kind of creating a new product for them when the iPhone had just started coming out. So we were kind of trying to figure out how do we keep Kodak competitive in that market. And we were basically ended up like designing a smartphone for them that they never implemented. So I've been doing that side. I really love that stuff. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And my one friend was working for a company called Capital IQ, and they were hiring developers. And I asked him, I said, I don't want to be a developer, but I do want to do something in software. And he said, okay, just talk to our hiring manager. And the hiring manager was their head of database, a guy named Rob. And he looked at my background and he was like, you do Photoshop and you're an engineer? You could be a product manager. It's like, what is that? Like, how does that have to do with anything? So he hired me and he gave me a shot, and I learned a very like traditional waterfall style product management coming out of that. I had been, now that I reflect back on it, I've been responsible both for the UX design pieces and the product management pieces. And that's how I ended up in there. Along the way, I left Capital IQ eventually, and I went to work for a bank as a software developer because all my friends were making money in software development. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. And nobody knew what a product manager did. Like if I said product management to people, their eyes glazed over. They didn't know what that meant. So I said, I'll go be a developer. Within like a week, I hated it. And I kept weaseling my way back into product management while I was at the bank. And they kept telling me like, no, you need 7 years experience to do this and 10 years experience. You can't go talk to the traders. Like that's sacrilege. And I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And eventually they just let me do it. So I did a hybrid of development and product there. I eventually left and I went to work at a bunch of, I knew I wanted to do product full-time at that point. So I left and I went to work at a couple companies, over the next couple of years in New York. So one of them was OpenSky and another one was called Conductor. And I went to be a product manager or UX designer too in the capacities there. And then I learned more about the split between UX design and product management. And I learned that, well, I spend a lot of time doing UX design as well, and I really love it. I learned that a lot of my passion does lean in product management because I think it's such a misunderstood role, and it's still evolving heavily. Like as we become really good at shipping software and as we get really, really good at, getting this data back and being able to understand it, what we were traditionally doing when I was taught like 10 years ago about the waterfall style gathering of requirements is very different than I think what people do with product management now. And to me, my passion is more about that side of it and trying to make sense of it and get people to understand why it's such a critical role for businesses. I had like some revelations. I feel like when I tell this story about how I started, I started in this waterfall type atmosphere. I did have that like Steve Jobs stigma to me, right? I love the fact that I was called a manager. I love the fact that, I love that title. I love the fact that I thought I was the person who was creating all these designs and coming up with all these ideas. And the first time I ran into a problem with that is when I had a team at OpenSky of incredibly smart developers. They're probably the best team I ever worked with. And they just didn't put up with that, right? They were like, no, we're not going to build this, or no, this is too hard. And they just pushed back. And it made me really, I never had that pushback before, right? And it made me reconsider what is my role. And the first person who was super influential there with me was my boss, Chris Keene. So he was the VP of product at OpenSky. And Chris basically took me aside and just said, you know, we know you're smart, we know you can do this, but you got to figure out how to get the developers on your side. Like, you got to figure out how to influence a team and go out. They were based in Nashville, so we were remote. He was like, go out, talk to them, sit with them, get to know them. And that was some of the best advice I have ever gotten. And when I started taking a step back and realizing it was about, you know, it was about the team, it wasn't just about me, and he pushed me to do that, that really changed my entire perspective about what did it mean to be a good product manager. So I was still using, I was still doing the designing, I was still doing the ideas, but it was our responsibility together to come up with those. And it was my responsibility to make sure that it was actually achieving the goals, and it was actually good design for our clients, and it was also the right things to be doing at the right time. But that didn't mean that it was all about my ideas. So that was the first time I got a really good understanding of that role piece. And I think Chris shaped that a lot. Along the way too, one of the biggest changes for me, and I think one of the most pivotal points in my career, and what made me end up in the kind of consulting and coaching style that I do today, was this concept of the lean startup and of agile. So that played a big role into how I thought about what I was building and why we were building it. So I went to a lean startup machine workshop. I read Eric Ries's book back in like 2012. And when I did this, it just made me go, oh, you know, I was frustrated because I wasn't getting the feedback that I thought I would be when I put my designs out there. Like, people weren't using it. It wasn't as good as it should be. And I couldn't figure out what was clicking. And the whole concept of just testing things and understanding and making it a hypothesis, like, blew my mind. And the whole lean startup movement by Eric Ries and the people who were part of it, like Jeff Goffolf, like, they really shaped how I approached my position as a product manager. And at the time too, I felt like we were very concentrating on the startup pieces of that, and it was all about like building new companies. But for me, just those principles and those qualities really made me reconsider how I did my job internally at companies as well. And that really pushed me to start experimenting. So I took all that back to OpenSky. I had a lot of buy-in from the company and from my boss, Chris, to try new things, to up my skills, to learn more, to do experiments, to test things, to make sure we were doing it. And he's the one who really pushed me to start teaching it as well. So that's how I ended up teaching. He was like, go teach it on Skillshare. I'll help you promote it. And yeah, he kind of drove me into where I am right now. There's like different degrees of this. When I worked at OpenSky, I did the admin section of the product. So I was doing all these internal tools. And one of the big projects that I always talk about that led me on this path to more lean startup is we spent a lot of time. So OpenSky was an e-commerce site that had celebrities. We had like over 100 celebrities and experts in different areas like home and fashion and healthy living and fitness. And they would sell products through our site. And we split the profits with them. So our CEO came up to me and was like, I need you to build a dashboard for the sellers. They have to understand like what they're selling and how much money they're making. I said, great. And I got to work. I thought I was doing it right? Like, I went out, I gathered my requirements. I like talked to all the sellers. I found out what they wanted. I made these beautiful, elaborate dashboards that I would have personally loved. And we spent 3 months on it. And it was so bad. Like, at the end of the day, we thought it was like, I really thought it was awesome, and it was terrible. We tested it. We showed prototypes. Like, we did everything we thought we should be doing. And we were getting feedback that was like, yeah, this is good. This is good. But we never really validated the core problem there. Like, we never really looked at like, why would people be using this, and in what experience, in what context would they be using it? And we just launched this like super complicated data platform where they could see all these numbers and all these trends and stuff, and nobody used it because that's not the way they thought about their business. So we wasted the 3 months of doing that. And in a startup, that small, 3 months is actually a really long time when you are normally releasing things every 2 weeks. So that was my biggest regret. But it also, because it was such a big regret, and that was the first time we ever used Google Analytics as well, I could actually get the data and see that nobody was using it, and then know to have those conversations with people about why. And then that forced me to actually look at better ways of developing. So that led me into all the lean startup techniques, the agile techniques, all the things that I use today. It made me a better product manager. But I'll never forget the feeling of just knowing that people weren't using your things, for sure. Like we do this every day, like we launch things every day, but I don't think people are really looking at the numbers to see if they're using it. And having that data that was like 0 sign-ins ever was very disheartening. And I went door to door, I tried training people on it, and they were just like, no, this is terrible. That one's my biggest regret, but it turned into like a really good another pivotal point in my life where I was like, I need to go figure out how to do this better. But that was a hard lesson to learn at the time. I think it's the concept of making people happy in their jobs. I find that product management's really misunderstood, like I said. And the reason I turned into a consultant and I turned into a coach is because I saw so many people frustrated with it. So I saw technology getting out there, not really doing anything for the customers. I also saw people just not having a good time in their jobs. They were confused. They didn't know what to do. They were just, they were struggling really hard to figure out what's my place in the world and how do I relate to this stuff. So to me, I get inspired by having that business side kind of come into play with technology. Like that's where my passion has always lived. I like seeing other people being interested in it. And I like making people happy at work. I've had the opportunity to work on some teams as a product manager where I loved going to work every day. I loved having the autonomy I did in those places to experiment with problems. I loved my team. I worked with some of the smartest people in the world. And if I can help shape a company to give that environment to other people, that really gets me up every day. So from the way that I teach it, I really like experimenting. My favorite parts of product management is testing hypotheses. I like making sense of all the big messes and trying to figure out which way we should be going. So the more I can work with my team to kind of like test hypotheses, experiment, learn, iterate on it, that's my favorite part of it, and kind of leading that. So even like with our school, we have an experiment board. We try like new things every day. We try different ways of coaching and approaching that and doing discussion sessions and teaching stuff. And I refine everything I do in the learning process. So my favorite part of being a product manager is that thing, is like learning each step of the way and trying to figure out what experiment can I run or what way can I test this and feel more sure about it before we get into just building everything out. Building stuff is fun. It's great every day, but to me, the hard parts is really figuring out what we should be building. So every time I get a chance to experiment, every time I get a chance to get feedback from people and like learn if I missed the mark or if I didn't miss the mark, that keeps me really excited with it. It's the fact that nobody knows what it means. So I guess, so let's say in a non-ideal world, the most frustrating thing is stakeholders, right? So who is really a stakeholder? And I spend a lot of my time trying to explain to new product managers as well, like what is a stakeholder and what is their job. So when I came in too, I was taught that my job was to like gather all the stuff from stakeholders and put it into requirements. And I see a lot of product owners doing that as well. And especially ones trained just through CSPO. That's how they make their user stories, gather from stakeholders, put it into the backlog. And I try to explain to them, like a stakeholder is somebody who has a stake in your product, but they're not the person coming up with the solutions. They should be somebody that you're trying to, it should be somebody that you're getting input from, distilling that input into whatever is needed for it to make a decision, and then running with the decision, right? Like you're not asking them for permission. You're trying to understand and use them for the knowledge that they need. So what happens is a lot of people go in, and I've experienced it myself, where you're like, well, the head of marketing is our stakeholder. I'm like, why? Why is the head of marketing our stakeholder? We're not doing anything to do with marketing. And the head of marketing is just giving solutions and requirements for what you want built from our team. And I'm like, they're not a stakeholder. They should be a partner on how to successfully launch this, right? So how do I go to the head of marketing and say, this is when we're launching it. I need to work with your team to figure out how do we launch this successfully. I want to make sure that they understand everything so that you guys can do your job well. And everybody sees it more as, no, the head of marketing tells me what to do. And it's really interesting, this concept. So that's where I've previously been super frustrated when I do this. That's where I see a lot of people be frustrated now, is this concept of who is a true stakeholder. And to me, it's the customer and the business goals at the end of the day dictate what you need to do, right? Like, got to listen to the customer. They're the only one you should really be getting the needs from in that perspective. You can have internal customers. You can have requirements from a technical perspective, and you should talk to those people. You'll definitely want to understand the impacts it has on other parts of the organization, but people should not be dictating solutions down for you to run with. That's not the job of a stakeholder. It's to inform and advise and give you the right information you need to make decisions, but it's not to provide the decisions for you. So in an ideal environment, that's definitely like my biggest frustration with that. In an ideal environment, I guess it's like when I do have the room and I have the space and I can make the decisions myself, and like, what am I left with? I guess one of the frustrating things I guess I would run into is the environment in which you operate. Like, so much of my job is dependent on having the right tools, like getting data. Sometimes it's really hard to get data implemented into your systems, right? If I don't have Google Analytics, Amplitude, any type of these projects, it's really hard for me to do my job. I can always find ways around it, but if you don't have those tools set up from a company perspective, you can only influence so much as your job as a product manager to really get in buy-in to get those types of things. So that's where I've run into a lot of frustration in even ideal environments, is just not having the tools you need to succeed set up so that you can do an iterative approach, so that you can get the data back, so that you can make decisions moving forward. I would love to really walk in, I think, Ken Norton's shoes. I love what Ken does. I love his talks. I've talked at Mind the Product with him a bunch of times, but I like the concept too of how he's kind of a product evangelist going around helping other teams. So helping startups, helping, them learn good product management, set them up for success. To me, that's such an important role. There's so many companies that are just starting up. Like we said, product management isn't really well understood. And what I see is making and breaking these startups, and this is a big problem that we have today, is that getting that good culture of product management in at the beginning. Like, if you start off on the right foot, there's probably going to be good success at the end of the day, but so many companies don't do that. So we get these, we see it today, every day, I think. We got these startups that started maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now they're in what I call like the teenage years, where they're starting to scale, but they don't know how to scale, and they don't have that underlying product management foundation and culture, because it's all been on the founders before. And it's all been about implementing their vision rather than letting the teams kind of come up with it organically and surface it up. So I love Ken's role. I love what he's doing to really, evangelize product management more. I love the fact that he gets to work with some of these teams at the most crucial moment, and be that person who gets to come in there and provide that knowledge for them and help them see how they would scale and how they would structure and how they might implement good product management from the start. So I guess my product is my school. And then I get to work with companies on their products, which are just fascinating. Like, I love the things they're doing, which is really fun. So I get to work with those teams. For my own products, I'm trying to build out Product Institute to be a place where we can really dive deeper into product management, education, and training. And one day I would like to see it as a good source of treating people to those levels that we were talking about in the beginning. It's not just a certificate, it's a place for you to get apprenticeship and mentorship and really level up your skills to that level. So in its initial phase, we have just the 10-week course, and we're developing more courses along it. But my excitement is watching people go through this and have like those epiphany moments where they're like, I never knew that this was my job. Almost all of our people are in some kind of product management role or product owner role. So a lot of them come from a place that was like, ta-da, we're agile. You're now a product manager. And they were like, well, what does that mean? So that's the type of people that we have. We also have product managers who are managers of product managers in the school, which is really fascinating. So they're going through it and they're going, I know a lot of this, I do it, but I never knew how to explain it. So now I have a way to go coach my people, and I know how I should be mentoring and leading them so that I can step back and they can do this work. So that's a really fascinating thing to see too. What excites me is just the giving people the tools to be successful. And that to me is what kind of drives me as well from the consulting and the work that I do right now. I'm very interested in how do we make organizations, or how do we make teams more effective? And what are the different tools and philosophies and principles and ways of working that I can help provide to people so that they can take that and make their lives better? So how do I be that person in between who's like, here, try this or try that? And that's really what keeps me driven as a coach. So it's really fascinating, because we are now in this market where people are trying to I guess, jump corners on product management education. And you see this a lot, I think, in CSPO training, Certified Scrum Product Owner trainings, right? Where there's mixed messages coming to product managers about what do you need to succeed. So in one side of it, from Agile, they're told their job is to manage the backlog. They're not given a lot of tools to do that successfully. There are some amazing coaches out there who teach CSPO with a background in product management as well. So they teach them the whole thing. And I'm like, great, keep doing that. And then there's other ones who don't. They teach them from here's backlog, write the user story, put it in there and go. There's some training available out there for like initial product management stuff of, this is just the basics. But we don't really have a space for people to get amazing at product management, or to get amazing coaching and training and level up their skills, and places where they can really concentrate on it and define it and take it from just a basic understanding to a lot of people just do that in their jobs. Like they just find out, they do it themselves. And there's a lot of onus, I think, on the person to level themselves up, which is great. But I see my products growing into be that space. I want to be that space that helps people get better at what they do. Because I think right now what's being sold is just like, this is the bare minimum for you to get a job. But I don't think we are really focusing on what's next. And that to me is what I'm interested in. How do we get people from, I now know the basic tools of what I'm doing, but how do I level it up? I think learn. So like what I've seen really good product managers do is they all stop and think, right? And it sounds really, really basic, but I feel like we get caught up in the motions of what we do so much that not enough people just say, where are we now? Where do we have to go? Right? Like, let me just think about this, assess, take a step back, breathe. And I think that's a really big trait I look for. People who could say, stop the train for 2 seconds, right? Like, let's just consider where we are and where we need to go from that. So I see great product managers really doing that. I also see great product managers every day. They're trying to figure out, how do I learn faster, right? How do I get more information? How do I understand the data? How do I get the right data? They're always constantly looking at ways to stay connected to their customers, stay connected to the data and the feedback coming in so that they can make decisions from that. So every day. I also see them explaining. So they come into their teams with their developers, they work closely with them. They don't go like hide in a corner or on an executive floor, right? They're sitting with their teams and they don't mind sitting there and explaining why. They don't mind giving them context. When I used to sit with my teams, I would say, hey, I went on a user interview yesterday and this is what I learned, right? And we don't have to have a formal meeting. We don't have to do that. I could just sit around lunch, tell them. I could sit next to them. I could Slack it to them, These were ways that I would just keep them apprised of what was going on and where my thought process was, so that they were never we didn't have to wait a week for a meeting for them to figure out where my head's at. I just keep everybody kind of informed and in the loop, but I'm not really pulling away so much of their time to do any of the administrative stuff. I'm just feeding stuff out there so that they can be mulling on it and thinking about it. And they could be coming up with the ideas as well. And the last one I think too is every day they're asking people, what do you think, right? They're challenging their own perceptions of what they think is right. And they're going to the team. And when they're stuck, they're saying, I'm stuck, guys, what do you think? What should we do? What direction should we go in? Do you have any more information? What could we learn? What could we do better? And they're seeking feedback and they're seeking advice and direction and other things from other people, not just themselves. They're not holding it all inside and trying to make those decisions. They're being honest and humble, and they're including people in their process. And I think that really gets a lot of buy-in, and it helps them with the influence piece of being, noted in the company as somebody who's, a team player and somebody who's smart. People want to work with those types of people. They don't want to work with people who are know-it-alls. I think the way that people are taught Scrum definitely fails a lot of product managers. And it's a controversial thing. I get a lot of certified Scrum trainers yelling at me online all day because they're like, no, it's the people who interpret them and use it wrong. But I think the way that we sell Scrum to organizations is what's wrong. We sell it by, hey, we're going to increase, Jeff Sutherland says this, he's like, we're going to increase your velocity by 400%. And what we're doing now is organizing an entire company around speed instead of around quality and around solving people's problems and goals. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I don't think Scrum is a bad foundation to start with, but there's a lot of work we need to do now to reteach some people who've been using it, and to help other organizations see the value and the outcomes that we're doing there instead of the outputs. And with so many teams I go into, they're just driving headlong into Scrum. And there are some very capable product managers there who are asking, when do we concentrate on the goal? When do we do the vision? When do we do this work? And we're stifling them. We're not allowing them to succeed because we've subscribed them to a process that doesn't work for them for the right stage of their product. So I want to see teams taking it as a starting point and then adapting it to what they need. And I want to see organizations giving teams the freedom to do that. I think that's putting people in a really dangerous position right now, is the way that they're really harnessing Scrum. And it makes me really nervous about it. Similarly, Jira. I had a CEO say to me, we're going to use Jira across the entire company, and I want everything to be in Jira, including like the legal department's work. And Jira is a tool, right? Like, it's not a tool to run an entire company on. It's a software development tool to negotiate projects. And is it the right tool? I don't know. I've used a Kanban board that works much better. So we focus, and what happens is when we use complicated sources like that, the role of the product manager becomes writing the best user story to put in Jira instead of figuring out what the problem is, right? And we're judging them now by the things that we can see readily in Jira rather than the things that they're actually doing. And their focus now gets taken away from doing their job really well and more to creating these outputs and these artifacts that people can read and that they perceive to be good. So I think we're distracting people from what is the good thing to do. Likewise, I think some of these tools that make it easier to experiment and get feedback get abused. Things like Google Sprints. While I think Google Sprints are great and they can really get people who have never experimented before into a way to experiment, a lot of people are using them to replace the big visioning and the big research stuff that they do need to do. Like, sometimes you need to do that. And I never advocate for people to spend 12 months researching stuff, but sometimes it doesn't take a week to get to a prototype. And instead, a lot of people are cramming this work into the 1 week and then moving on and running with it. And it's a good starting point, but it's not a good ending point, right? Like Google Sprints, you take the prototype, you test it, and then you keep doing it. Like, maybe the next week you do another one, right? But nobody does it back to back. They see it as a one and done thing, and then they move on. So we abuse these tools, which I don't think have bad intentions or sometimes these underlying, they're not supposed to be used like that, basically, at the end of the day. But they look for it as an easy way out, an easy way to do experimentation, an easy way to a fast way to get everything done. And you can kind of sacrifice the quality of what you're doing there for the speed in which you're doing it. So I think we need to move away from some of that stuff and really focus on, why are we using these tools, and is it the right time to use these tools? Same can be said for rapid prototyping. You only need to do rapid prototyping when you're testing an experience you've already proven is the right experience to concentrate on to make it better. But people are doing it too early. They're doing it when they don't know what the problem is. They're doing 12 prototypes instead of 2 prototypes that are worth testing. We abuse A/B testing as well. I did that too. Like, since it's fast to put out A/B testing, you see the quantity of tests you can put out. And once I worked with a company that they were like, well, we can't get in touch with customers to figure out what the problem is, so we'll just A/B test the front of our site like 45,000 times. No metrics moved, but it looked like we were doing something, right? So we're judging like the quantity of what we're doing. All these processes make it really easy to game the quantity of what we're doing rather than the quality of why we're doing it. So I think any tool like that, we need to step back and focus on using the right tools at the right time, depending on the stage of our product and when we need them. And I think all of these tools are useful when used well, but I don't see people using them well because it looks like they're trying to take a shortcut to do things quicker instead. So from my perspective, what I do now today too is spend most of my time coaching and training people who are new to product management. So I usually end up with a lot of people in my class or in my clients' offices who are very, very new to product management. One of the things that I've seen that makes a great product manager too, that I try to push people to figure out before they decide to dive into it, is they're thinking through how do we validate ideas and really get into it. So like, how do we validate ideas and figure out if this is the right thing to go and if it's the most valuable? So whenever I have somebody who's trying to get into something, if they don't have a place to practice it, right? Like they're not on a Scrum team, they don't have developers, they're kind of isolated. I suggest that they just try to validate problems, right? To do the thought pattern that is involved in that upfront work of trying to figure out, like, should we be going after this? So I say, take what you're passionate about, take one of the problems, go interview users, go talk to people who you think have the problem, understand it, try to come up with a solution and create that kind of portfolio around that thought process that you can bring to clients and try to show them how you thought through it. To me, a lot of the development pieces are incredibly hard, working with developers, trying to work with them well, trying to work with the team, trying to put software out. But it's that beginning piece. Like if you don't have somebody who can really think through the thought process of validating an idea, trying to understand the business value in it, trying to see the potential markets, trying to understand if we go this way or that way, which one will have more of an impact, that to me is that's the hardest part of product management. So if I can get people thinking through that, showing their thought process with that really helps. If you do work for a company, so I used to teach at General Assembly, and we had a lot of people who were not product managers there, but did work for these larger companies. And what we said is just take one of the problems that you see from your customers and run with that in the context of your company. So we had one person actually from Shutterstock. She was a customer help representative. So she would answer the phones and help people with it. And she did a phenomenal job on her project. She took one of the biggest things that she saw come through the helpline. She understood it. She spent all her time on the phone talking to these people about it, trying to understand better. And she put together a whole proposal on how Shutterstock could tackle that through software. And she talked to the developers. She went out. She actually figured out what was possible, and she mocked up a bunch of wireframes. And she ended up being hired in as a product manager from her role because she really tackled the problems and understood them from that way. So I think it's an easier transition for sometimes to do that lateral move in a company, and anybody who can really find problems that are relevant for their business and show how they might tackle them has a pretty good shot of being recognized in the company for their skills. A lot of it's networking, right? Like trying to understand, trying to find people in jobs that you'd be interested in, going to talk to them, seeing if they're hiring. I think a lot has to do with that. And I see most people move into a product management position where they have no experience because they found somebody that they could talk to and explain and show them, like, I do actually understand this thought process. I do know how to do this. Just give me a shot. So to me, that really helps. I think there's a bigger problem there though. And this is one of the things that kind of drives me right now. We have no apprenticeship models in product management. Like we have very few companies, some big companies, but not many of them that have like junior product management roles. Right? Everybody's looking for a senior product manager. I know all these places are like senior product managers. We need them. We need like experienced people, but there just aren't that many experienced people in the right context out there. Like a lot of them may have been going through the motions, but it doesn't mean they're a senior product manager. So one of my personal things is trying to figure out how do we create the apprenticeship models for product management? How do we get that in? So I take some junior people and I try training them up. That's like that's one of my things that I would really love to see companies implement more of. Besides that too, like the only ways you can really fall into it is that it's falling into it. So if you have all these people with all these skills, what can they do? They can network, or they can try to go more, I think, the domain route, right? Like I am a very experienced person in healthcare. Let me find a healthcare startup I'm interested in and see if I can insert myself as a product manager there with these other skills. And I do see that actually open up doors for people as well. I've seen people go through boot camps, like General Assembly will help it, although there's like a big lag, between the time when they finish the course and when they go in, because they are looking for experience. Like people are always doing that. So I teach an online class, and we do have a couple people go through that, but we do gear it as well towards people who are not transitioning, because I found that it's a really hard problem there. I had a lot of people reaching out to me when I started my online class and said, we want you to certify us. We want to be a certified product manager. And I'm completely and utterly against certifying people, especially through a 10-week class. Like I cannot tell you if you'll be a great product manager. I know you now understand the concepts around it because I taught you that, but I cannot say that you can demonstrate the skills of being a great product manager. So while I think classes help, you definitely get the knowledge you need, I don't think they're the only thing you can rely on to say, like, I'm a great product manager. And yet that's really where I see our market moving a lot. On the first day, I think it's really about figuring out where you are, get the lay of the land. I always tell anybody this, even people who come work with me as consultants, and I do this as a consultant, when you come into somewhere, ask as many questions as you can and seek to learn. And don't press your ideas on other people, right? Like don't jump in and try to go crazy with stuff. Just try to gather as much information as you possibly can so you understand where people are. So on the first day, I say you should be meeting with your team, right? Meet with your team, meet with your boss, meet with everybody one-on-one as a group, and just ask them why do you work here? What gets you up in the morning to come to work? Why do you enjoy working here? So you know where they are and what motivates them. And also, what are we doing and why are we doing it, right? Get everybody's perspective on that. Why are we building this? Can you give me the history? Can you tell me where we came from? What has been the biggest challenges for you working here? How might I be able to help with that? Those types of things. Just get the lay of the land, understand who's there, understand what's going on. And then also try to figure out, who are your customers? So during the first week, I think you should be trying to figure out, how do I get in to sit in as much user research sessions that are already going on as I can, so I understand our customers. How do I get access now that I'm fresh and have some fresh eyes to the product so that I can try it out myself and just get an experience as a first timer going through it and understanding what's going on. So in the first week, the first month, you should be trying to figure out, how do I get as close to the customer and understand how the customer uses things as much as possible and get that really good foundation. And then you should be trying to think of how do I start talking to the people that I need to influence, right? My managers, maybe my manager's manager, the stakeholders that are around you. How do I get in touch with them? How do I start forming relationships? I think it's all about that. And then it's about understanding the why, starting to put that puzzle together. So I always keep my little puzzle of cascading goals around, where I'm okay, so if this is the vision, and when I talk to the CEO, I understand his vision, it's my first week, or I understand the vision from somebody else. If you're in a really large organization, right? I understand the vision. I ask what they are. Okay, I ask people too, what is the most important thing you could possibly accomplish this year from a company level? And I try to get what that is. And then I say, okay, what is the most important thing that we can do to help get to those goals? Asking my manager, the people around there. And I understand that. And I start to paint a picture of why we're doing the things we're doing, so that now after a month, I can start judging on whether we're going in the right direction and start to be more effective from that standpoint. Yeah, I think I've learned over time to not react to things so extremely, but definitely when he told me at the time, I was well, it's not my fault, I'm not doing it right. That's usually my MO. And I feel over the years, I've gotten better at that. And I try to think and reflect and not jump into it. And the way that I approach any scenario right now is to learn and to get the groundwork before I start advising. And to me, I had to learn with feedback, to just stop, understand where they're coming from, understand what feedback's being given to me, and then respond. So definitely when he told me that, I was no, this is not my fault. This is how I was taught. But it had hit a point where relationships were so bad that anything could have been better. And I said, he was just try it, right? I know you don't want to do, but just try it. And I tried it, and then I saw it, and I was oh, you're right. If as soon as I changed the script and just said, what do you guys think? All of a sudden, relationships just got so much better. Everything got so much better. And it was really that critical trip. He told me this before I went down to Nashville. we did that. We spent the whole week working as a team, and I changed my whole approach that week. And when I got back, like, they talked to me online. Nobody was talking to each other before, but they were like, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Like, did you have a good trip back? Like, you can just tell that the whole relationship changed. And to me, I was like, oh, I like going to work now, right? Like, I'm not dreading going to work. I like working with my team. They're awesome. They're really smart. Like, those are good feedbacks. And seeing it in action really was what I think did it. But I was totally hesitant. I'm always like, I think people are very quick to get some of those critical feedback, and then you're like, like, no, it's not my fault. You get defensive. And it's definitely taken me years to like not be defensive on that stuff, but it's still like, sometimes it does strike a nerve, and you have to take a step back and kind of reflect on it. It's not your job to come up with all the ideas. It's your job to really, influence a team and work as a team to get into that area. I think that was the best advice I ever got. It really made me just like take a step back, listen to the team, improve them. And I found that when you collaborate, you just learn so much more. You can go so much further. The team has so many ideas that I never would have thought of. And I think too, with that, it was a message too that he put in there. It's not, feedback is not a personal thing. Nobody's saying like, Melissa, you're a bad product manager when they give feedback. It's just trying to make you better. So if you go in there with an open mind of, it's the team's job to make this better, and it's the team's job to give feedback even on my things, and me to give feedback on their things, that like keeps us all together. So I think that advice to focus on the team, it's not all up to you, to be humble, to ask questions, to approach that, it really changed the perspective of how I operated, and it made me a lot more successful. The stuff that I build doesn't necessarily mean it will be successful just because I built it. That was the whole thing that got me into the lean startup thing. It was a very hard lesson to learn because, as I said earlier, like, I did see that as my identity as a product manager, that I was the ideas person. I came up with all these great ideas, and they were going to be fantastic, and I could do anything I wanted to. As soon as you throw data in the loop, all that gets smashed, right? Like, goodbye perceptions of you doing a good job. So implementing that data and learning, that was a tough lesson. Like, I liked the concepts of lean startup, but then seeing that, sometimes I'm not really good at predicting what people want, or sometimes I'm not really good at making this interface. That struck a chord. It did make me kind of reconsider, like, am I actually good at this job? But it also did force me to learn. So it was good in a sense of, it was hard in a lesson of, it really showed where I was weak in certain areas of whether it was UX design or understanding problems or customer interviews. As soon as you have data, like you surface all the, but it did make me also driven to go fix it. So it pushed me more towards learning. So I got all the books I could possibly read on customer interviews, and I took classes in it, and I did the same thing with UX design, and I try to be a better designer for different things. I try to understand how to make better software for people. So it forced me in the right direction, but it was one of those things where I had just assumed I was really good at it because people had told me I was really good at it, but they were judging me off the perception of, could I talk a good talk and could I make really good specs, right? That looked pretty good. They weren't judging me off the success of my product. So it really changed the entire way I evaluated myself as a product manager. My first thing is, there's always, the easiest way to do this and to get used to doing it is take whatever you are building and then pretend that you're not sure that it's going to be right, and then write it as a hypothesis, right? So even if you're mid-feature, everybody thinks you have to start from scratch if you're doing like these types of approaches and this experimental hypothesis approach. But that's not true. You could just start with what you're doing. So let's say somebody asks you to create this widget, right? Start asking why. Why are we creating this widget? Can we write it in the form of a good hypothesis? What is the problem we're solving? And then put that out there as the expectation that when we launch this thing, just keep doing what you're doing. We're going to get data and really see if it hit our goals. Like, the most important thing you can do before you launch anything is say what you expect it to do. That's your success metrics. And then measure it. And the more that you do that, even in environments where you don't think you have the ability to experiment, if you can just do that, set the success metrics, launch it, and measure it and compare it, now you have a conversation with other people about, hey, this didn't actually hit the things that we thought it should. Should we go back and fix it? And that starts getting the company on a level to think about, okay, are we actually launching the right things? Are these things doing what we think they're doing? If they're not, why not? And it starts moving you more into the hypothesis and experimental mode. So it can be that simple to just get started with it. Just like take whatever you're building right now, whatever's coming out of your sprints or whatever timeframes you're using, you don't have to use Agile, and just say, why are we doing it? What do we think is going to happen? Write it down and then launch it and measure it. And that can be like your first experiment that you're in. And it starts changing the conversation to get buy-in. I think as you get better at that, you'll start setting those hypotheses broader. You won't assume the solution before you get into it. You should start with the problem and then the goals, and then you will generate a couple different solution ideas of what to do, and you'll test those and you'll get better at testing them quickly. But I think it all starts with just putting that data out there first, right? Like get it down, get the hypothesis down. And then once you do that, it just opens up a door for a new conversation. Ideally, you have sprints of experiments. So you might shorten your 2-week sprints down to 1 week. And then you have the whole team executing on a couple an idea or a couple different ideas. But it kind of depends on what level of experimentation you're at. I think you need, and I think this is where we get stuck with Agile as well, which I just like tweet ranted yesterday. But a lot of time when we do Scrum teams, we put together like a team of 9 people, which might be too many people for an early stage product, right? If you don't know what you're building, why you're building it, or what the problem is, dedicating 9 people to something sounds like a business mistake, first of all. But it's also a logistical constraint, because now you have all these developers and people go, what do I do with them? I have to keep them busy. And then they just start feeding them stuff to do because they're expected to release every 2 weeks, which to me is not right. So if you have early stage products, we have to start talking about what's the ideal team size as well in that validation phase. So to me, I found success working with like 1 designer, maybe 2 developers, or 1 full stack developer. It depends on how big the technical problem is you're solving, and the product manager, myself. So we take that small team and we experiment on everything together. We're learning together. We're talking to customers together. We're divvying up the work. The developers are looking into technical implications of what we're doing. So we're all working on these experiments together, and we might use a sprint structure at that time of, okay, Mondays we're going to plan, and then we'll go into developing it, and we'll learn, and we'll do that. Sometimes it's more organic and we don't even use sprints. Sometimes we just plan and ship faster than every 2 weeks. Sometimes it takes a month to do that because we have very technical, complex products. So I think it's about getting your team size right for the first part, and then bringing on more people as the space gets a little more validated. And it's not about throwing everything over. It's about organically forming your team around your problem and keeping those people with the knowledge on it, and then bringing in more people to support it as you go. If you are stuck though, and this is where most people I see going through Agile transformations are stuck. Once you have that team, you don't want to change it all the time. So if you change projects, what we normally do is we'll have things that we're trying to experiment around and learn, and then we'll maybe have like technical debt or other projects that we have to lay down. And we'll get into this cycle where we are having like a small team kind of do the experimentation out of that. And they'll be working in the sprint cycles or outside of the sprint cycles to really learn. And some of the developers will be working on tech debt. But what we do is involve those developers along the way in it. So like maybe twice a week, 3 times a week, we have a brainstorming meeting, or we have a readout of and a synthesis of the customer information we learned. We'll have the data. So it's not that we're throwing anything over to the developers. They still the people still working on tech debt still do work, still help us, still talk to customers if they want to talk to customers. It's up to them. And we still advise them on where we're going. We still get their input on what we should be doing. It's just that they might be spending 70% of their time on tech debt and 30% of their time with an experiment, whereas other people might be spending more like 70% of their time with the experiment and 30% aiding the people going through the tech debt. So we try to divvy it up slightly more like that. But I think if you have a small enough team, when you're just looking for the space, everybody can work and integrate into the sprint cycles and do that. And then you'll need kind of a certain level every sprint as it becomes more defined what you're building and validated. You won't need as much upfront research. You won't need as much research going into it. You won't need as much brainstorming because it's pretty defined what we're going to do. But you still do need those check-ins as a team to get there, get together, try to figure out what we're doing, plan it out, vision for what the sprint's going to be, look at the goals, brainstorm what you're going to be building, and then go into it. And I see a lot of teams skip that once they get into repeatable 2-week Scrum cadences. And to me too, like Scrum, like they say, Scrum is a framework. And I see a lot of companies new to Scrum go, okay, we just do back-to-back 2-week sprint schedules forever. So I'm like, when do you stop and think about, did we reach something or reset or start a new project? And we don't do that. We just have people jump into sprint schedules. So in Agile, like the most important foundation of Agile and principle that you ever look into it, whether it's Scrum or Agile as a whole, is we inspect and adapt our processes. So if you reach a point where Scrum is not working for you or a 2-week sprint cycle is not working for you at that point, you should be inspecting and adapting your process to work around that area. And I think teams don't do that enough, and they really should. I think it is that question. I think it's that, right? It's the knowing that you have to use the right tools at the right time has been the biggest thing. I did get swept up in like other stuff, and I had a hard time with it at the beginning because I was told, like, even coming out of Lean Startup Machine, I used to go do talks for them, and they asked me to follow their pattern for my experimentation, which was launch a landing page, do a concierge experiment, do a Wizard of Oz. And I had to like reformat what I did into these patterns to go do talks for them. And I was like, that's not how I do it. Like I said, sometimes I don't do a concierge. Sometimes I go to a Wizard of Oz. Sometimes I don't do any of this. Sometimes I just build it, right? How do you explain to somebody that thought pattern? And that took me years to really figure out how to explain it back to them. But I think that's really what made me successful from the get-go, was just understanding that it's not following this linear pattern. It's following a cyclical pattern to learn. And as long as you're focusing on that learning, it reduces the risk, right? So I think I was more effective in my role because I was able to do that. I was able to really sense what we should be doing when. It was that focus on learning. It was a focus on testing and not just assuming everything. I knew everything at the end of the day. And I think that's really what pushed me to try to get better at product management and to try to make better products, was that inherent, are we going in the right direction? Do I know enough to make decisions rather than just blindly pursuing something? I get people with a lot of misconceptions of what they think product management is. And one of the common ones, I think, is the like Steve Jobs approach. I actually had my Uber driver was taking me to the airport, and I tried to describe what I did. And he was like, so you're like Steve Jobs? And I was like, no, that's very wrong, right? Inside companies, I don't think you get that luxury to make all those decisions and be that kind of arrogant asshole type person that really drives that all the way through. And so I don't think it's a Steve Jobs approach. Then on the other side of it, when you talk to developers, they're like, oh, my product managers are the pain in my side because, you know, they're the ones who are always telling us what to do. And they come up with all the big level, you know, pictures and what to build, and they ship it over to people. All these misconceptions around what they really do. And I always ask people when I start training them, I said, what do you think a product manager is? So I get all those types of answers. And my response to them is more, you are the person. I believe a product manager is a person who balances the business value and the customer value. So they're not completely on the customer side, but they're not completely on the business's side either. They're the person who has to look at the scope of work and the vision for the company. And they have to figure out, how do I manifest the vision of the company? How do I get to that through the products that exist or the products that we can create that really drive business value while providing enormous value to our customers as well. So there are always these people who like tip these scales on either side. If you go too far in one direction and only look at business value, right, you don't have as much customer value. And I think you see a lot of companies doing that today, right? Like they're trying to cut the margins, cut the costs, trying to drive down prices, but then they sacrifice a lot of customer value, right? It's like airlines. When you go out to airlines, it's all about the cheapest price, trying to get as many people in there. You sacrifice customer quality like crazy. And on the other side of it, if you completely optimize only for customer satisfaction and not business value, you're basically giving things away for free, right? So we need to find like, what is that balance? And then it's about taking the most important things we could do to get that balance and really focusing the team around it. So to me, the product managers are not responsible for coming up with like the crazy wild ideas or, you know, in isolation. They're not responsible for coming up with all the wireframes and the what to build and all the features, right? It's more about the person who drives direction for the team and provides them with enough of that why. Why are we doing this? Why are we hitting these goals? How are we balancing this? so that they can work effectively with the team to come up with what should we be building, how should we be building it, and doing that effectively. So to me, that's the most important role of the product manager, is finding that balance, optimizing that system as it is. What are the traits that you need for that, right? You can't be this person who wants to come up with all the feature ideas and be the hero, right? I don't think hero culture works well in product management, because you're also not really a manager either, right? Like, I think a lot of people read manager and say, oh, I get to manage people. Like, I manage the developers, and that's not true. You have to lead with influence. So I look for people who are humble enough to know that they don't know everything, directed enough to make decisions under pressure. So you can't have somebody who's just waffling through data or getting analysis paralysis. You have to have somebody who will commit to try something, but they're humble enough to know that they won't always get it right. And they will listen to other people, they'll take in other opinions, they'll synthesize that data, and they'll make sense out of it and determine what direction to move in. And then they have enough influence and enough buy-in with the team to really get people to move in that direction, right? They can talk to people at all different levels of the organization and explain compellingly why we should do stuff. They know how to generate buy-in for that. And they're clear-sighted enough to know when they need to change direction. They should be gathering that feedback, looking at that data and saying, hey, we tried it, we took this bet, it didn't work. We have to change direction and go this way. And they're the ones that can really harness everybody around that. I think my biggest thing that I do personally to help, so I coach a lot of these managers as well. So when I run into a particularly difficult situation and I advise all my product managers to do the same type of thing, I sit there and I just say, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And like, I ask this question over and over again until people get slightly frustrated with me, because at the end of the day, they do come up with the why, like they know what the why is. And sometimes you find that the why is because the CEO told me to do it, right? And now you know at least why, and that's good. It's out in the open. We know why it came down. We can deal with it. But if you don't ask why when people are giving you solutions, they never really think about it too. And I've had really good experiences with my product managers asking why we're doing certain things to their bosses. Like I had one student who came to my class. She went back and talked to her manager and just said, I don't think we should be doing this. Like, why are we doing this? And they just had a really tough conversation about it. And at the end of the day, it took like a month, but her manager was like, yeah, you're right. We really shouldn't be doing this. Like, it's not the most important thing for us to do. So you can start impacting that with just like a really simple question, just digging into why, trying to understand that. I've had a lot of, I'd say more junior product managers come to me frustrated saying, I'm never allowed to focus on the problem. And I said, why aren't you allowed to focus on the problem? It's because all my customers just give us the solutions and then we have to implement it. Or all my managers just give us the solutions and then we have to implement it. And then I asked them why, like, why do you have to implement it that way? Because they said so. And I'm like, well, is it the best thing to do? No. What's your job? To figure out what's the best thing to do. Okay, so go back to them. Try to dig into the problem, ask them the questions, try to get to the root of it. And then they do that. And I feel like senior product managers do that automatically. Like people who are just getting new to it, this is a new concept for them. They don't really understand that piece. But as they dig in, they can focus on the problem. Then once they have that, they're given the autonomy to run with it. So sometimes it's more of a perceived environment than a real environment. I've met a lot of managers who are like, I would love my people to just run with this stuff, but they don't seem to be doing it. And then you go to the product managers and they say the same thing. Well, they're just giving me solutions. And I said, did you ever dig into it? Did you ever push back? Did you ever want to have a conversation with them? And the answer is usually no. And when they start doing that, they find that their managers are actually really amenable to them focusing on the goals, digging out the problem, trying something new. Like they're looking for that pushback, but they just don't know how to communicate their thoughts, right? So I think a lot of our job is getting to the heart of the problem and surfacing that back up. Yeah, it's trying to figure out, I think too, it's challenging what is normal. So I get a lot of product managers who spend their time, I think, fighting company culture or, trying to get buy-in to do the things that they need to do. And I don't know, I'm like slightly conflicted with that piece because I tell people, they ask me like, if I'm spending all my time fighting company culture or trying to get buy-in for this, how do I be a great product manager? And I think there is a conflicting part of that, right? Of if you're spending 90% of your time trying to get buy-in to get Google Analytics implemented, or you're spending 90% of your time trying to experiment, when do you get to be a good product manager? So I tell people to consider that, but I think there is an element of being a good product manager that's about improving your processes, right? And one of those is trying to learn faster. So to me, you should be looking at how long does it take to get feedback when we run this experiment? And is there any way that we can actually shorten that, either through our processes by making a better system to collect the data and come back in, or get in touch with those people that we're trying to reach faster? Can we implement that? Can we standardize it so that we can move faster as a team? And then there's other ones too about really, like I think that's the right level people should be looking at, like that's the right normal, but it is also challenging perceptions in an organization if you need that stuff. It's saying, no, I need to go talk to the users, because if I can talk to the users, I can learn faster, right? And figuring out, how do I go up and just ask for what I need, or how do I be creative and get around legally some of the things that are being imposed on me. I see really good product managers putting themselves out there to do that stuff, instead of being hampered by the organization saying, no, you can't do that. They're like, well, this is how I be a great product manager, so this is what I'm going to do, but I'll figure out how to do it. The most responsible, I think, is keeping everybody informed on the why. So the most important thing I think you can do as a product manager is make sure everybody understands why we're doing things, and make sure you understand why, and you're choosing the right why at the right time. I think that's really important. But then making sure everybody else understands why too, and keeping them grounded on that core problem, that core goal, that core thing that's tying everybody back together. Where I see a lot of teams struggle is they lose focus along the way, right? Like shiny ideas come in. So you have to, the most important thing you can do is just keep people focused on that why and what those problems are. And if you can do that, you can usually make a lot of successful headway going into the right direction. Yeah, I think it's always communicating. Like whenever I see people or I myself hold meetings, right? My first question is, okay, what is our goal? Like, I don't care what we're talking about, but today we're just going to remind ourselves what our goal is right now. What are the problem? And like, what do we know? Where are we? So we spend like 5 minutes at the beginning of every meeting that we're talking about the work that we're doing, just rehashing, where are we? We know this, we don't know this. We know what this problem is. Okay, what do we know about the problem? What's still unknown? Are we doing the right things right now to learn those things, right? And that sets the tone for the meeting. So I think the more you can reiterate that every time you get a chance to talk to people, the better. I also try to surface that type of work. I use something called the product kata that I kind of took like Toyota Kata and made it for product management. So I put up this big board in people's offices, and on the top it has the goals for the teams, and it lists out like their experiments and where they are. So that keeps track of everything. And as you look at it, like as a team, you're reminded, okay, this is where I am, this is what I've done, this is where my goal is. And it just keeps teams like focused in that space on what they're doing. And I always encourage people on the team to challenge others if they think they're veering off in the wrong direction. Like ask them why. Is that really going to get us to the goal? And the more you can surface that, the more you can show people like why we're doing certain things, and have that even present, like the problem just present in your space, so people can look at it, the more they remember that this is why we're here. One of the most important things I learned too is really to figure out what motivates people. It changes the whole conversation of what you do. Like if you, I used to get frustrated at people for just coming to me with all these ideas or all these harebrained stuff that I thought was not relevant at all, or not participating or not doing it right. And the more I started thinking about what motivates people and how are they being judged for success, the more I figured out how to have conversations with them. So when the crazy person from sales comes up to you and is like, we have to build this feature, we have to build this feature. And you're like, God damn it, this is the 50th time that they've done this to me this month. I've told them that this is not the way to do it, right? That's the approach a lot of us will take. I've taken that approach too. It's very frustrating, but if you stop and think, that salesperson is getting paid a commission based off what he sells. So he's got a $100,000 deal coming in. He really wants to push this feature. How do you try to work with him so that you build the right thing and you help him reach his goal and you help him sell it, right? But you're not putting yourself in a bad position of building the wrong thing, right? As soon as you get into that motivation, you can try to figure out how to deal with certain problems that come your way. And that to me has been the most useful thing that I've ever learned, like throughout my whole career, whether it's with product management or with not. It's learning why people do what they do. And that helps you really understand what tactics to take with them. The other thing too is, like product management, I always explain product management as a system. So I explain like that business value and the customer value side optimizing together. But it's impacted by so many things, right? On the side of the business value side too, and internally in the business, like the people you have, the culture you have, the strategy you're setting down, the processes you have, those principles, that all impacts the budgeting, especially too, right? It all impacts product management at the end of the day. And if you don't understand how those levers influence it, it can be really frustrating for somebody who's stuck, right? Who's just like, I don't understand why I can't do the things you do. And if you start backtracking it and try to figure out how all those things are influenced, you can figure out, where do I tactically start improving so that I can make a better product management system? Like, which part is holding me back? But it's not such an insular thing. I think we think of design as, design, and we think of development as development, and they're all definitely influenced by stuff around you. But product management, building the right things at the right time and when, and optimizing that value, is so heavily influenced beyond one person's control by the surrounding area, and that it's never going to end up exactly the way you planned at the beginning of the day. It's always going to have those things pushing you in one direction or another, and knowing how to navigate that system, I think, is really, really important. So anytime I start consulting with a company, I ask them a series of questions that I figure out if they are ready for good product management change. And I tailor my tactics based on it. Like, if you are not willing to change some of the parts of the company, I'll say, I can come in and I can train all of you, but I'm not going to spend 40 hours of my week working with you, because I don't think we'll get very far unless you're willing to change these things. If you're willing to change these things, I'll give you my time, right? Like, we'll work together. And it's a process. Some companies are not there. Some will come back to me in a year and say, okay, now we're ready. So it's about knowing where you are. And I give the same advice to product managers. Like, can I do my job? Try to figure out what's causing the problem. So I try to figure out, how's the strategy set for the company, right? Is there a clear vision? I go around, I ask everybody, like, what's the vision of the company? If nobody can tell me the vision of the company, something's broken, right? Like, something's broken, like, really far above you. So eventually I ask the CEO, like, what's the vision of the company? If he can't tell me, that's a problem. But if he or she can tell me, it's not getting trickled down correctly, right? So you're kind of diagnosing where is the problem and what we're doing. And then I ask people, like, why are you doing what you're doing? Like, what's the goal? What are you trying to achieve? And if they can't give me an answer there, I know that there's something wrong with the goal setting, right? So now we've got a problem with the vision trickling down into goals, a clear strategy, and how to get there. So it's more about focus. If you are trying to evaluate as a product manager, like, can I actually survive in this company? Can I actually thrive? I have those conversations with your manager. I would sit down with your manager and say, what do you see as the vision of the company? What do you see as the goals? Say, I don't understand, see if you can understand, if they can explain it to you. If they can, usually that's enough to get you going. If they can't, then you're going to try to figure out, like, it's above my manager, right? It's above my sphere of influence. And maybe your manager wants to take that on and go fight for you guys to know that. And that's great. Now you have support. Now you have a place to kind of stay, and you can work on what you need to work on because you have somebody who'll fight with you. But if you don't have that support, if you don't have somebody who's willing to go to bat and figure out the why so that you know how to do your job, that's where I start to go, is this something I can really change? Is it something I can influence, or is it not? Is it, like, well beyond my control? There are things like processes I think that teams can take ownership of and change themselves. I see so many teams that have, like, a learned helplessness behind process, where they're like, well, Scrum tells me to do it this way, so I have to do it this way. Again, why? Scrum tells me I have to do. Who is standing over you with a shotgun telling you that you have to do it that way? Nobody, right? Like, it's almost nobody. Sometimes their managers are saying that, so I'll go talk to their managers, or I'll say, have a conversation with your manager. Explain the thing you need to change to be more successful. And I say, every week, like, you have a retro, right? Take that retro. In that retro, you should be discussing what to do to improve. So what's one small thing you can do, introduce you to your team to improve? What's one small thing you can do? And every day, try to get better with that. There are so many things that are within the sphere of control of a team, but they won't take ownership of it. They don't step up. And they say it's because of pressure from management. And sometimes it really is. Sometimes you just can't get away from that. I'd say 9 out of 10 times. So I hear managers who are like, I wish my teams would just step up and take ownership. So where's this disconnect coming from, right? Like if you talk to your manager and you include them and you explain why, almost everybody I've seen, if you can give a really good case to the people above you about why you're doing the things you're doing, they respond really well to that. Like they want you to come in, they want you to take ownership of it. They want you to do your best you can possibly do. It's not a super defined process where we wake up every day and we do the same thing. It's what I've been doing and trying to explain in my book is a product manager's process should be assessing where we are right now, assessing where we have to go, trying to figure out like, what do we have to learn? What is unknown? Where is the risk, right? To me, things that are unknown have a lot of risk associated with them. If we're building stuff off stuff we haven't learned, things that we don't know for sure, we're inviting risk that our product will fail. So to me, a product manager always has to figure out what those known unknowns are and try to figure out how to learn from them. So I say, your process is to every week look at what do we know and what don't we know, and then figure out how do we best answer those questions. And there will get to a point where after time, the question is, will this actually work in the wild? We've answered as much as we possibly can. And that's when you go into a process like Scrum, where you're trying to iterate on it and figure out how to ship it and get it all broken down. But at the beginning, I say that you have to go through different phases, and you can jump phases depending on the amount of certainty at each part. So the first phase is problem exploration. So you set the goal. You always have goal setting first. And I say that this should never change. This part of the process never changes. There's always a goal. You always know where you're going. You have it set. You figured it out. Great. You do some research to get in there. You pull some data. Then there's problem exploration. What is the problem we're trying to solve? And is it the right problem to solve, right? Is it strong? What is the context around it? How do my people experience it? Everything you could possibly know about the problem. Sometimes the problem is really readily apparent. You've been hearing it for years. You have all this data on it. You don't have to do a lot of work there because you know it. Like it's just there. It's very apparent. So great. You don't spend a lot of time there. Other times, you have absolutely no idea what the problem is. So you have to do a lot of research. You have to talk to your customers. You have to experiment a little bit by using like small techniques, like concierge experiments, where you like deliver something manually, get people's feedback, iterate on it. And you're just shaping the context around what's the right problem to go after. Once you know that, it's about solution exploration. So it's a question of what is the right solution to solve this problem. So in that phase, it's more about experimenting quickly to figure out what direction should I be moving in, is to provide clarity around that. So in there, you're doing some maybe lean startup style type experiments. You're doing like Wizard of Oz. I love Wizard of Oz experiments. But maybe you're also just building, A/B tests or small functionality enhancements to see if it does it. It might not be something big. It might be something to just clarify direction around it. And you're coming out of there knowing, okay, I believe this is the right way we should be going. And it turns into solution definition. So I think on the line of solution exploration to solution definition, that's where you're talking MVPs, right? Like that's where you're talking about first versions that we can put out, small little slices of the most valuable thing we can get out there and get feedback from. That might look like a full solution, might not, depending on what you learn. So then in solution definition, that's all about really breaking it down and making sure you have the right aspects of the solution to really test it. And that's where you want to be small. You want to put out small pieces of functionality that provide value, get the feedback, create a holistic vision, try to figure out how to test that vision, getting into that. So that's where you really see the product come to life in more of its form that it will eventually take. So as a product manager, my entire process is about, where am I right now? Am I in problem exploration mode? Okay, that means I'm going to be using these types of tools. Am I in solution exploration mode? That means I'm going to be using these types of tools like Google Sprints and that stuff. Am I in solution definition? Okay, that's where maybe I'm using a Scrum process to iterate and put things out in increments and iterative fashion of small, like usable functionality so that I can get feedback quickly. But instead, what I see with process is everybody goes, we do Scrum. But why do you do Scrum? Like when do you do Scrum, right? And they do it for everything instead of at the right points. So I think a product management process is more about really understanding, where are you? What do you need to learn? And then applying the right tools, the right things for that process to learn what you need as much as possible. I think it's really so I talk a lot about it in the product kata post that I have about how to assess that. It starts the mindset there. So if you can use something like kata, what it does is it asks you a series of questions to just get you in the right mindset for this. And then you can figure out what tools to apply as you go through it. But what kata does is it says, like, what's your goal? Where are you now in relation to the goal? What's the next thing you have to learn? How are you going to learn it? Right? And then what do you expect to happen? What did happen? And it walks you through these questions repeatedly so that you get in the habit of actually asking those questions and applying the right things at the right time. So I found that as a really, really useful tool to get people to consider, where are we right now and what do we have to learn, and to just get in the habit of asking that question. So after a while, when you do kata, you don't have to do it anymore because you just automatically think that way. So to me, that's the most important thing I found. And that's really the secret too for like all of Toyota Lean, was when they implemented continuous improvement, they used kata. And what kata did was got everybody in the habit of thinking about that for their processes all over Toyota, including the CEO, the person on the ground floor, like everybody, people who swept up the stuff in the factory use kata. And it just makes them think of, how do we improve ourselves? How do we get better at this? And for product managers, I think it's the same thing for your product. How do we improve our product? How do I know more? How do I make certain that I'm learning the right things at the right time? To be brutally honest, I consult with companies of all sizes now to implement better product management processes. So this is like my main job that I do during the day. And they're great companies, and I love what they're doing. When I come in and I kind of diagnose the problems and look at, why are teams prevented from doing good product management, all the companies always think that it's because their teams aren't trained. So I come in and I'll train them. We have a program for that. And some of the times that's true. We have a lot of product managers who just kind of got thrown into the job and it was like, go, and they don't have the support they need to get trained. So that's a huge issue. But once we train them, once we do that and they know how they should be operating, we run into the next level, which is the managers of the product managers. Right. And we find that most of those managers are just dictating down solutions to the teams and telling them what to do. And this is widespread. It's every single company I've ever seen operates this way. It's not just one specific company. It's just almost everybody does this. And it starts even further up at the top. Sometimes it's the CEO just saying, go do this, go do that. And then those middle managers just repeating it down. So my biggest advice for any manager of product managers is to just get out of the way of the teams, right? So the best thing that you can do as a manager, any kind of manager at any level, is your job is to provide that direction I talked about, but at a higher level. What are the goals? How are we going to measure you for success? Let's make sense out of our space and figure out what's the first big step we need to take to reach that vision. I'm going to narrow down the scope for you so that you can concentrate in these areas around these specific goals. And then let your team kind of figure out what to do. How do we get there? How do we execute on this? How should we get there? And you keep them on track. Like, you provide the guardrails of, this is in scope, this is not in scope for you. This is something that you can play with. This is what you can't. For example, if you're doing a company where you're pricing things, as a manager, you might say, you guys cannot change the price, but you can do anything around that, right? Like, this is something that stands still. So you let people know where the boundaries are, and you let people know what the goals are, where the success is, why you chose that, where the direction is, where's the vision. And then you let them figure out how to reach it. And then you coach them through that, right? You give them direction. If you have more junior people, you're going to have to hold their hand a little more. You're going to have to show them and mentor them and do some of that apprenticeship model we've been talking about. But if you have very competent people in a self-organized team that's like got the resources they need, your job as a manager is to provide that direction and then be the shit umbrella that stops everybody from interfering with them, right? You keep them on track, you let them run, but you give them the space that they need to really get in there. And I think that's the most misunderstood concept of management in general everywhere. It's not even just product managers, but that we are the people who tell people what to do. And that's an old school management thought cycle for industrial workers, right? The way that managers came up through there is that we had very low skilled workers who didn't know what they were doing on factory floors, and managers had to tell people what to do. Now we have very high skilled workers, usually even at the bottom of the pyramid of everybody, we usually have very, very high skilled workers there, and we have to give them the space and the creativity, allow them to be creative in problem solving. And that's what we hire them for. We don't hire them just to execute. We hire them to think for their brains. So managers have to give people the space for that and just kind of step back, provide enough direction, keep the focus, provide the goals and the outcomes and the guardrails that I want you to stay within, and then just let the teams run and give them the guidance where they need, be that support. For me, like the difference between companies that have successful product management and companies that don't is this notion of a product-led organization. And what does that mean? It means that the development of products for customer value, to provide customer and business value, right? Like that little crux there, that leads the organization on where it's going towards its vision. Too often, especially in B2B companies, we have sales-led organizations, which means we go out first, we sell everything. We're like, yep, we'll promise you that. And then product is just basically rushing in order to like fulfill those requirements and contractual obligations. And they're not focusing on what could we be, or does this go with our strategy, and how do we turn into the vision? So a product-led company culture is more about, we have a good strategy, we have a good vision of where we want to go, and we develop that with our product management. Like we develop those products and then we sell it, right? And then we figure out how to sell it. And we're always looking for partners, and we're always looking for leads to prove it with teams along the way, and sales helps a lot with that. But we're not just promising features to make the sale. We're building features because it strategically helps us move our company. And to me, that creates a whole new way that you talk about why you do the things in your company. It's no longer driven by sales goals. It's driven by customer value, like in strategy, right? Like how do we reach that vision? How much value are we providing? Are we hitting our goals? So I describe it like product-led in that way. And I think the culture that you need inside is something that's really focused on the outcomes that you produce at every level. It's about understanding what are the big things you need to tackle, having that focus around them from a goal perspective at the top, and then letting everybody at the bottom, kind of on the ground floor closest to the customers, dictate what we do to get there, right? I don't think somebody who's in a C-suite who doesn't really talk to customers every day can determine the best feature that we should be building. It's the teams that are out there talking to customers every single day, watching what they're doing, seeing that behavior, getting that data, that are going to be best suited to figure out what the solution is. So we have to flip it, and we have to have those teams figuring out what to build, and the guidance on the top really looking at the market and the strategy, and where do we want to fight, and where do we want to play, where do we not want to play, coming from the people at the top. So to me, that type of culture thrives. And that's kind of like setting it up from structure-wise, but you do notice too traits of what's acceptable in a company and what's not. I see a lot of companies driven by fear of failing, fear of not hitting those goals, right? Fear of doing something wrong and getting fired. And it's usually these antagonistic places where managers will like yell at their people if they took one step out. And that doesn't promote a good product management culture either, because then everybody's afraid to try something different, right? Everybody's afraid to improve on their process and try to make it better for them, because it's like, no, I have to do this. So it's such an authoritative environment that nobody has room to be creative. Nobody gets a chance to think. Nobody gets a chance to try something, fail, and learn. So that's the biggest thing I think an organization can do, is promote a learning environment. And in order to do that, you need a safe space for people to try something new. Not everybody will succeed with what they try, but if they learn from it and it helps move you forward and it gives you more information than you had before, that should be rewarded. That should be thought of successfully. We also need a place where we can organize into teams and we can focus on teams. I see a lot of people concentrate more on their roles. I'm a product manager, I'm a UX designer, I'm a developer. I do this, I do that, but I'm not willing to participate in your world, or you're not allowed to participate in my world. I see people get territorial over that. If it's got to be, the responsibility for success has to rely on the entire team. You can't get anything done with one person. So if we change the way that we talk about success and the way we talk about people succeeding as a team effort rather than an individual effort of I did well today, it's we did well today, I think that promotes another culture of moving things along, getting people to see where success really lies. One of the things that I've learned too is that it touches on this thing, and it's advice I give to some people who come to me who are frustrated about changing company culture. If you're not in an environment where you're set up to be successful, and it's not going to be easy to change, it's time to leave. And it's trying to focus on where you can be successful and where you can actually practice your craft. So I say, if you want to get into things like I do now, which is I fight that fight for people now, right? Like I go into the companies and I try to change the processes and the structure so people can be successful. But that's a full-time job. It takes every waking moment of my life to do that. But if you're a product manager, is that the fight you want to really fight? Or do you want to just be a really, really awesome product manager? Like, do you want to be the best product manager in the world? Or do you want to be a change agent? So I give them that advice, like go where you think you'll be the most successful. If you want to get into stuff that I do, try to be a change agent, try to build that from within, try to work your way up the ladder so that you can actually impact that change. If you just want to be the best product manager in the world, find a place where you can practice that, where you can be the best product manager in the world. So I think that's like some of the career advice that I give people today who are really frustrated with those situations. And it's hard to hear, but I think companies need to hear it too. Like if you're not allowing people to be successful, they're going to leave you. They're going to try to find some place that will be successful. So it's better for them to take care of the change for people so that they can actually do that. So the one is really about what is the vision of the company and where are we going for that? So that tells me too, like what if people all know the right direction that the company is going in. One, I asked, does the team come up with what to build or is it directed from top down? So I always ask that to like product managers, like who came up with the idea? That I'm seeking to learn that question. So learn the answer to that question. So the stuff I ask is like to the product managers, tell me about the last thing you released. Who came up with the idea? Was it you? Who set the goals? Like, how did that work? Explain the whole process to me. So I'm looking at, is it coming top down or did they organically get a goal and figure out what to build? What was the last product you decided to kill? That one's a big one. I see so many organizations focus on shipping the amount and the quantity of features instead of the quality. And everything gets so complex, right? Like we have just all these features like piling up everywhere and we've got things that nobody knows how to use. So I always ask them, when was the last thing you killed? If they haven't killed anything, I know that there's no culture of experimentation in there. There's always just build it, just build it. When's the last time you talked with your customers? So any product manager, I ask them like, when's the last time you talked to your customers? When's the last time you visited them? When's the last time you got some feedback for them? Talk to them on the phone. If they haven't talked to their customers, it's been months. I know there's not a good feedback loop there. What is your goal? That one's the hardest one. I ask people like, what is your goal? And they always give me an output-oriented response. Ship this feature by February. And I say, okay, but why? Like, what's the business goal under it? And if they can't tell me what the business goal is or what they expect that feature to do, at the end of the day, I know there's not a lot of thinking of why we're doing the things we're doing behind there. And there's probably not a lot of focus. I know that the feature is probably coming from management still. So that does help with the top-down stuff. And that there is no culture of talking about why we're doing the things we're doing. So that stems to like a whole bunch of company issues as well of we're probably doing too much. We're probably not doing things strategically. We're probably not having a good strategy at the top of the company or a vision or something to anchor us. So that usually is one of my biggest, that's my most important question to answer. If nobody knows what their goals are, then we have like a big problem. And then I ask people like, what are you currently working on? And the product managers who are very customer oriented talk about their customers and the problems they're solving for them when I say that. So it's like, oh, I'm building this really awesome, I asked this for in one of my interviews with a senior product manager who worked for Oscar, and she released the step tracker that gave you the Amazon gift cards. And she was like, well, we were really trying to figure out how to get people to engage in a more healthy lifestyle. And we found that like walking correlated to getting people a little more healthier. So we figured out how we can incentivize them to do that. So I ended up building this step tracker and partnering with people. Like she explained to me why she was doing it and how it provided customer value. Whereas other people who are focused on the features flip it and say like, we're building a step tracker that, and you'll have all these fun little features in it, right? But they're not talking about why they're really doing it or like what the value is for the customers. And then the last one I don't ask the product managers, I ask everybody else in the organization. I said, how would you describe your product managers? Like, what are they like? What do you think is good? What do you think is bad? In organizations, you can get a lot from the team, right? To see how effective a good product manager is. And if you're ever, I think if you're ever like a product manager curious about what you're doing, right, have some third party ask your team what they think of you, and then you can really see if you think if they're doing your job well. I have some places raved about their product managers, and they were like, they're awesome. They allow me to do the best job I possibly can do because they include me, and they talk about the goals, and I know why I'm doing it. And I've seen so many developers like in love with their product managers because they work so well together, and they lead them, and they've got such a great working relationship. And then I've seen other developers or UX designers as well who are like, they don't involve me. They go out, they do user research on their own. They throw me over the requirements, and it ends up in more of a waterfall type environment. And you can really learn a lot, I think, just by asking the people who work with product managers what they think about their product managers. I really think it's the problem solving aspect of it. If you can focus on, we don't talk about that enough. Like we talk about product managers being the people who know what to be building and breaking down the features and know what a good feature is. But I look for people who are better at approaching problems and breaking it down and having that skill set. Like, I think it's only going to get more and more apparent as we go that we need people to focus on that problem, and we need people who can harness data to justify it. So I look for people who can put a really good story together about why we're doing the things we're doing and how it's going to help us achieve that vision. So they're the system thinkers, I think, who can navigate their landscape and say, all these things are important. This is how they all interact. They can synthesize that data, and they can target the problems and really figure out how to solve those problems with the team, like identify where do we start with that. To me, that's the most important part. So this concept of systems thinking, I think, is going to get more and more valuable. I think we're going to see, this is something I haven't really formulated a lot of thoughts around too, but as microservices take off too, which is going crazy right now, product managers owning a piece of that service, we're going to have to really evaluate how do we fit in to the overall product when we own a service, right? So we're going to have to get better at collaborating with each other, really understanding the domain and the problems behind that service, and then rolling it back up into how does it fit into the larger product. So I still see it coming back into less about the features, more about the system. How do I integrate with the system? How do I solve the right problem in these systems for the right time? So people getting that big picture and being able to break it down into smaller, what do I need to learn right now? The company I'm working with in Boston, they ended up in that Scrum situation where they have now 350 product owners who have never been product owners before, or product managers. Like 2 in the whole organization have been a product manager somewhere else. And it is an interesting thing about what we were talking about earlier with that apprenticeship model, because they decided, no, we're not going to fire all these people who are incompetent. We're going to train them. And it's a really, really inspiring and interesting approach, but it's a really difficult approach too, because we have to hire some more senior people they can learn from as well. And we're doing that. But to me, yeah, it's how do we, I'm interested in this apprenticeship thing. Like, how do some of these organizations, they're going to have to grow their own product managers because we don't have a lot of places for people to learn right now. So how do we kind of get some companies on board with that? Or how do we set up the right programs inside companies so people can learn? Or how do we have outside programs even? Like, I like what Jared Spool's doing with the UX designers in Tennessee. He's got like a 2-year college for them basically to learn to be UX designers. Like, what's next for product management with that? That's one of my biggest questions right now that I'm working on, and that I am really excited to see how that shapes up over the next couple of years. When I started as a consultant in 2014, nobody wanted product management help. Like, I tried so hard to be like, yeah, I can help you with these processes and implement experimentation. And I had the door slammed in my face so much during then. I had people just get angry at me that I would actually consider experimentation. I had so many people who were like, no, that's not how we do it. And I still get that to some level, but I've seen people be so much more receptive to trying to figure out how to do good product management now. And I do think Scrum has had a large part to do with that, because organizations that haven't had product managers in the past now have product owners, who I consider the same as product managers. And they are, yeah, I don't see any difference between a product owner and a product manager. Product owner is just a role in a Scrum team. But now these people need to figure out, how do I be product managers? So they're like, okay, we need help. We need to figure out what we're doing. And to me, Scrum is kind of, it's a double-edged sword where I see people abusing Scrum, but I also see it paving the way for us to have conversations about good product management. And that I think has really, really helped. So I see more companies now amenable to thinking through this, to thinking through experimentation. A lot more companies are getting used to validating. When I came in 2014, nobody wanted to talk about validating. They were like, no, it's about building. And now we're actually having conversations about it. They focus on the problem. People are really pushing that. They're really pushing you to talk to your users. So we're seeing a lot more reception and people being like, yes, this is how we should be operating. Even if we're not quite there yet today, there's a lot more buy-in than there used to be for that type of way of working. I think too, the other trends I see like surrounding product management that make our lives better, continuous delivery, continuous integration. If you can ship things faster, you can learn faster. So like all of these technological trends, making it faster to prototype or faster to run an experiment or faster to ship code, they all help product managers at the end of the day, because now we can get the feedback we need. We can test things, we can do that. So I love the trends that are coming out in the tech space that just make it easier for us to do our jobs. And yeah, I think like getting into that experimental mindset, being able to actually experiment, like those two things are really pushing it. And that's changing the way that we perceive product managers. Now, since it doesn't take 6 months to build anything, sometimes it does, but in most cases, it takes a lot faster to build things than it used to. We don't have to be 100% right when we put things out there. So instead of being the requirements gatherers and the people who spec out everything, we are now the people who can form the hypotheses and really focus on the value. And we get back into that. Whereas I think a lot of product management in the past was seen as people who help drive the developers to ship things. And now we can ship things very easily. So it's like, great, now what do? We focus on the value. We get core to what we really are concentrating on, because some of the most difficult parts of software development are being solved right now. Scrum. Scrum. It's the product owner piece. There's definitely more to it, but the since it's double-edged swords, people are now more receptive to product management training, but they don't understand product management at all. I'm happy that product management is getting into more organizations because they need it. But I do see a lot of people going through like CSPO training, coming out of it, being hired into these companies, and the companies are hiring them. I do not fault anybody for going through CSPO training. It's great that you're trying to learn more. Fantastic. But it's the companies who are like, oh, I need somebody as a product owner. If you have a CSPO training, you're hired, right? And then those people not really knowing what they're doing. And the company is not really seeking to understand what is a good product manager, how should I hire them? They're looking for an easy way out to judge if somebody's capable, and they treat it as sitting through a 2-day course, which focuses mostly on Scrum and story pointing rather than really the core of product management of discovering value, doing the value, trying to figure out the roadmaps and how do we create a great product vision and really work with people there. So we're not really interpreting. I see people not really spending the time interpreting and trying to understand what do product managers do. They're just taking the kind of wave of Scrum that's coming out of Agile and saying, okay, we need these people in these roles. How do we get them as fast as possible? And now we have a lot of people who don't really know what they're doing in those roles, to no fault of their own, to the fault that we're not really taking the time to really define what they should be doing and how they do it effectively. So one of the things that I think could be beneficial that I see is I'm trying to create a tool. I do this with boards right now, but like creating tools to communicate goals for companies and see progress towards goals. Like we need a dashboard like that. I think it's different for every team, what they're gonna do. So I don't know if there's one standard way of making that, but I would love just like a dashboard that's like, here's the overarching business goal. Here's the subsets of goals. This will feed into that and we can see the progress on if we're hitting it as a company. I think that would be super beneficial. But for teams, like, I don't think we need another Jira. I think they can use a Kanban board on a wall like more effectively a lot of times. I think we over-rotate on saying we need a tool for things. But every company I've ever worked with does something slightly different. And what works for them as a tool may not work for somebody else. And I do hear a lot of people say, you know, we do need a better product roadmap tool. We do need a better product visioning tool. We need to do that. And I think there are a bunch of places that are trying to solve that, like ProdPad and some other ones, which is great. They're going after that stuff. But to me, like, what I can suggest to one team may work really well for them, and what I might suggest to another one might not work for them. So I don't see the need to create more tools at the moment. What I think we need to do is standardize our approaches to product management. I think the discipline has to become more mature before we really can find standard tools or approaches to really defining it. And that might not be the same for one company as another. So I'm hoping that we get into this mode where I think Scrum is like good training wheels for people. It's a good way to start practicing how to do that. I'm hoping now we get product owners who are going to come out of there in 5 years who are like, okay, I need good product management, right? So I'm hoping all these Scrum teams are now working effectively. They're going to be doing experiments. I think we're pushing on the experiment mode here so that they're really learning and validating what they're doing. To me, the shape of that is really going to be important. Getting to that point is really going to be important for the success of companies. I also think, again, this microservices thing is going to get really interesting because we're going to now have product managers who own a service and product managers who own, maybe, I don't know how this is going to work, but like who own the product that it gets serviced through. So let's say like, you have a dashboard. Everything on that dashboard is now a microservice with a product manager behind it, but then somebody also has to own that dashboard. So how do we work together as a team? And I think product management's going to go, it's been seen as an individual sport. I think it's like your team owns this product, go over there. And we're going to have a lot more collaboration between product managers at every level to make sure that all these things are working together and we all have a consistent story behind it. Because while one service like doesn't provide value sometimes in and of itself, it does provide a chunk of value. You need it to work in the larger system. So how we structure product management, how we structure teams, how we structure reporting, a lot of that's going to be getting really intertwined and very, very difficult, I think, over the next 5 years. So we're going to have a lot to really solve there. And the services aspect of it, what does it mean to be a product manager of a service, right? Service design is a big thing that's coming up. I think that's going to tip into, I think it does already, but it's going to tip way more into the product management world of what makes good services, how do they interact with it? It's not just about the software, it is about the end-to-end experience. And as we move to things like voice technology, like Alexa type stuff, right? There are product managers behind that. Now we don't have interfaces. How do we still provide the value? How do we interact in this world where technology is moving away from the traditional screens? It will still be there, but into a different place of interactions with our customer, and how do we still get the value in there? So I think we'll see some interesting stuff with the voice stuff as well.